Chapter 51, Chapter 45. Eliza, she heard a voice murmur, but she opted to ignore said voice and curl up closer to her pillow. Eliza, you need to wake up, they said again, and began shaking her, which Eliza thought was very rude of them. She really would rather they stopped so she could carry on sleeping. Eliza, you're the one who told me to wake you up. Fuck off. She heard someone laughing, low and smooth, but Eliza ignored it and curled up closer, smiling as she inhaled the comforting scent around her. My, such language, little star. Tom, she murmured sleepily, blinking blearily. Tom was propped up against the headboard of the bed, an old book levitating in front of him next to a dim candle. She was resting in his lap, still buried beneath the covers, and his hand was resting in her hair, playing with it absently. You did tell me to wake you up, he pointed out, ruby-red eyes dancing merrily in the darkness. I regret it, Eliza groaned and pushed herself up, throwing the blankets off her. You could always stay, he pointed out, and although the offer was tempting, very tempting, Eliza knew she had to get back to Hogwarts before time caught up with her. Tom let out a sigh as if she was inconveniencing him by being responsible, knowing Tom she probably was, and lazily waved his hand, flicking the bedroom door open. My flu is linked up to Severus' office, and considering this place is unplottable, no one will be able to track it. Don't get into any trouble on your way there, he drawled, and Eliza grinned as she padded out the door only to pause before she walked round the corner. Tom looked at her with an amused look on his face, clearly highly entertained by her dithering. I'll catch you later, she stuttered out, and immediately headed for the flue, face burning. Catch you later, fucking moron, Eliza muttered to herself, and heard Tom's low, melodic laughter behind her. Eliza was still cursing herself when she stumbled through the flue and into Severus' office. She was even too mortified to take in the rare and honestly downright disconcerting sight of Severus Snape in pajamas. Rough night, he drawled, and Eliza didn't even break her stride as she walked out of the room and merely tossed a shut up over her shoulder as she returned to the common room. Catch you later, Merlin, she was an idiot. Albus sighed heavily as he walked into Grimmauld Place. The once macabre house had been thoroughly redecorated by Sirius, and Albus was always surprised when he saw the difference it had made to the grim Gothic house. However, the modern decorating did nothing to alleviate the melancholy mood that had settled over the rather meagre meeting he had called. It was the day after Samhain, and Lord Voldemort had finally wiped out almost all of Dumbledore's forces. Sirius and Remus were sat at the edge of the table, Severus grimacing over a cup of steaming coffee. There was Marley and Arthur, as well as their sons Charlie and Bill. Nymphadora sat in the middle, hair dark and lank, as everyone stared at her in horror. Where once a full force of talented witches and wizards sat, now only sat 8. If you could please recount what happened last night, my dear girl, one last time. Nymphadora let out a shaky sigh before collecting herself. We received intel that the Lestranges would be causing trouble in Muggle London. A team went out to try and dispatch them, but we received a Patronus message requesting for backup. All the best doulas available headed down to Tower Bridge, and the Lestranges were there. 5 other Death Eaters. It would have been a hard fight, but a winnable one. But they weren't alone. If it was possible, Nymphadora's hair became duller. You know who was there, waiting for us. And that woman who was at the raid on Azkaban, Eris or something. She knocked me into the Thames. It's the only reason I got out alive. Severus, Albus prompted, and the dour man let out a sigh. As far as I knew, the Lestranges were meant to be holding a raid in the Muggle world. The Dark Lord has supposedly been out of town, making a deal with the vampires. It is rare that Voldemort takes part in his own raids, Albus mused. This change in behavior was worrying. Added on to the other inconsistencies Albus had picked up on, he was truly starting to worry. The murder, the mayhem, that was nothing new. The hatred and sadism, the clear egotistical nature, it was all reminiscent of Voldemort from the first Wizarding War. But something, somewhere, had shifted. Albus just didn't know what. And this Eris character. Have we learnt anything more of her? Nymphadora started wringing her hands. She seemed like just another Death Eater, but she was on a whole other level when it came to fighting. Worse than Bellatrix. She even took out Mad-Eye. A grim silence followed after that, and Albus tried to contain a sigh. Albus had always held on to the hope for peace, but these days it seemed to be becoming less and less of a possibility. "What do we do now, Albus?" Marley questioned, and Albus grimaced. "There's nothing more we can do. We shall keep running interference. I shall keep working with the minister. We will keep an eye on Voldemort's forces and make sure he doesn't infiltrate the ministry and the aura force. And eventually Voldemort will make a mistake, and when he does, we shall be there. Eliza Potter may be the last hope for them all." After finding out she had almost died, her court were insufferable. They didn't care about the whole murdering business, nor did they particularly care about the order being almost completely demolished. But the second they found out Eliza had been severely injured, almost died, Draco started berating her so loudly that there wasn't a single person left in Slytherin that didn't know about Eliza's near-death experience. Over the next few weeks her court hovered, although Eliza couldn't really blame them. Thea took over all her duties as Queen of Slytherin, doling out prefect duties and organizing the year groups. Blaise confiscated her necromancy book, and Daphne and Draco barely left her alone for a second. But if one of her court had almost died, Eliza would be doing much the same thing, so she put up with it as gracefully as she could. Eliza didn't mind, really. She loved spending time with her court anyway, especially on a night like this. They had all stumbled up into Eliza's bedroom, taking advantage of the fact they no longer had to share a dorm, and were all sprawled out across it. Theo had taken the seat at her desk, and Eliza had graciously allowed him to prop his feet on top of the old table as he sipped his hot chocolate, whipped cream, 5 marshmallows. Blaise was sat on her rug, long legs sprawled out in front of him as he drank his macchiato because he was pretentious, and the Hogwarts hose elves loved him far too much. She, Draco, and Daphne were all squished on top of her bed. Eliza had her own hot chocolate, whipped cream, 3 marshmallows, and Draco was painting Daphne's nails as they gossiped. "So are you 17 yet?" Draco questioned as he tried to paint a flower on Daphne's nail. He was getting quite good at it after all these years. "Yes and no," Eliza responded, and they all took a moment to level her with confused looks. "Technically, because of the time turner, I age faster than the rest of you, so technically I should already be 17. But I will only be 17 now if I continue to use the time turner at the same rate I have been for the full year, which means I won't be 17 in this moment for another 6 or so months. Please stop talking. Which means I won't be able to access my magical inheritance until my actual birthday, even if you could consider me 17 now." "I don't think Draco was asking about your age for that reason," Daphne interjected, wiggling her eyebrows, and Eliza felt herself flush. Picking up the pillow and lobbing it at Draco's face as he burst into laughter. "We were all thinking it, Eliza," Blaise drawled. "You can't have a hot dark lord lying about without us being curious." "Yeah, come on. Spill the details," Daphne egged on, and Eliza watched as Theo seemed to valiantly try to drown himself in his hot chocolate. "There are no details to spill. We haven't even kissed since last Yule," Eliza pouted and watched as her court exchanged dubious glances. "Nothing?" Draco asked. "At all?" "Well," Eliza drawled out, thinking about Tom's words that sour night, "there was this one incident." By the time Eliza had finished filling in her court, they were all looking her. The silence lasted for 5 seconds before they all burst into noise. "He so likes you," that was practically a love declaration. "And you didn't kiss him?" Daphne screeched, and Thea let out a tired sigh in the corner. "Of course I didn't kiss him," Eliza protested, "because if I kissed him then I want to kiss him again, but that won't end well because one day he'll just get bored of kissing me, and you're an idiot." Theo finally cut into the conversation. "Drink your hot chocolate." Eliza looked around for support but found none. "Theo's right. You are an idiot." Eliza pouted and did in fact drink her hot chocolate. She still loved them, even if they did call her an idiot. It was later that week when Eliza was cornered by Slughorn after a class. December had finally set in, and Hogwarts was now blanketed in a thin layer of snow, and Slughorn had them brewing pepper-up potions all lesson, which were no doubt going to be sent down to the infirmary for the upcoming flu season. Running a hand through her now frizzy hair, Eliza turned to Slughorn with a half-smile and fake cheer. "Yes, Professor." "As you might have heard," the man blustered, smiling largely as he waddled on over. "I'm holding a bit of a soiree for Yule. You know how it is. Just a small gathering. A few people I've known over the years," Slughorn went on, and Eliza didn't even have to fake her curiosity. Slughorn's parties were sort of famous in high society. I'd be happy if you could join us. And young Mr. Malfoy and Zabini, of course. Slughorn chipped in, and Eliza smiled politely back, wide and happy. Of course, Professor, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Eliza started walking out of the room, 3 invitations stuffed into her hand, when she heard Slughorn call out behind her. Oh, and bring a +1 M girl, the more the merrier. Now that wasn't good. Eliza had never really needed to find a date before, and whenever she had just ended up with Tom. In fact, at almost every high society function she had to attend, she always ended up bumping into Lord Gaunt. But Tom couldn't save her from this one. You need to bring a date, by the way, Eliza said, lobbing the 2 invitations at Blaise and Draco's heads. That won't be a problem, Blaise said with a smirk, unrolling his invite. That won't be a problem at all. Draco smacked Blaise over the head with his invitation, and Daphne let out a bright laugh. And who are you inviting, Eliza? She asked, and Eliza turned to look at Theo. I'm bringing Theo, Eliza said immediately, and Theo started shaking his head frantically. No, you are not, but you're my best friend, you have too. Excuse me, Draco cut in, arms flailing. I think you'll find Theo's my best friend, and that in fact he's coming with me. No, he's my best friend, Eliza shot back. I've known him since I was 5. Draco protested, and Theo glanced up from his book. It was your birthday party, and you pushed me off a broomstick, Theo said dryly, only to be interrupted by Draco. That's not the point, Theo, Draco hissed mutinously, but Eliza cut him off by jabbing him with her finger. You can take Astoria. No, he's not, Daphne spoke, finally getting involved in their ridiculous conversation. How can I get drunk if my little sister is at the same party? Well, Draco blustered, why don't you just go with Blaise? Because Blaise is going with Eliza paused, and they all turned to look at Blaise, who had been watching the scene in front of him, clearly highly entertained. Parvati. No, not Parvati, Daphne interrupted. He tried dating Padma, and now they both won't talk to him. Spin it. Draco tossed out. Oh wait, no, wasn't it Abbott? No, you're thinking of Belle, it's not her either. Blaise, seemingly taking pity on them, finally decided to contribute to the conversation. It's brown, lavender brown silence. Didn't she break up with you? Daphne asked, and Thea turned another page of his book, ignoring them all. She didn't break up with me, Blaise said, offended. I stopped sending her letters. Then she slapped me and used Weasley to make me jealous, but now we're back together. Blaise could really be quite disgusting at times. So I get to go with Theo, Draco said loudly, and Eliza had to muffle a snort when she heard Thea let out a long, suffering groan. I'll duel you for him. Eliza shot back immediately, and Theo finally interrupted with a distressed sigh. Or you could just go together. Did you ever think of that? Eliza and Draco looked at each other. Or yes, actually, they could just go together. Eliza huffed as she tossed more clothes onto her bed. If she had known she'd be attending parties this year, she would have packed more accordingly. As it were, it looked like she would have to transfigure a dress out of some of the clothes she already had. Although she wasn't as good at transfiguration as Tom, she was sure she could manage something like he had for Yule. In the end, after a bit of trial and error, Eliza had made a rather pretty dress. It was a one-shoulder dress, a deep red wine that flared out and ended above her knees. Simple, but it would do. Eliza tied her hair into a bun and stole Daphne's gold heels before meeting Draco in the common room. You look like a Gryffindor, he said as he fixed his tie. And you look like an idiot, Eliza said breezily, linking their arms together. But you don't hear me saying anything. Have fun, children, Theo called from his armchair by the fire, and both Eliza and Draco paused to send him a dirty look. Shut up, they said in unison, and primly strode out of the door, hearing Theo's soft laughter behind them. It said a lot that the rest of the Slytherin didn't even bother questioning them anymore. Although she supposed, having half of them been taught by her at some point, they were now used to her oddities. Do you have any bets tonight? Eliza asked as they trotted down to Slughorn's classroom, which he will have no doubt transformed for the night. Draco snickered slightly and nodded his head. 2 galleons on someone crashing the party, 5 galleons on a Daily Prophet reporter being there. I have 10 galleons on Granger going with Weasley, but Blaise has 15 on her going with McLaggen. You all need some better hobbies. Eliza cut in with a smirk. Merlin, imagine having a peaceful enough year to have hobbies. Eliza would have responded if they hadn't arrived at Slughorn's soiree. Slughorn's office had indeed been vamped up for the occasion. Draperies hung all across the walls, and the room was bustling with life, guests and waiters chattering and music filling the air. The second she and Draco had pushed through the room, Slughorn seemed to miraculously appear before them, grinning largely as he announced their presence in a great booming voice. "Eliza M. Girl, so glad to see you, so glad to see you. We wouldn't miss it for the world, Professor." Eliza responded with a charming smile, and Slughorn let out another booming laugh. "Oh, you flatter me, you flatter me, and I see you and young Draco have decided to come together." "I thought you'd have the whole of Hogwarts clamoring for a date," he chortled, and Eliza kept a pleasant smile fixed firmly on her face. "I've sworn of dating, sir. I've had enough of charming boys for a lifetime." "Ah, yes," Slughorn tittered nervously. "That whole business with Lord Gaunt. Yes, enough of him, sir." Eliza said with a wave of her hand. "I'm sure there are some far more interesting people you can introduce Draco, and I too, right, sir?" "Of course," Slughorn said brightly, clearly relieved by the topic change. "Brilliant, sir," Draco finally said, a bright grin on his face. "We've heard quite a lot about your famous parties." "I'm sure you have, M-boy," Slughorn gloated, and then started gleefully showing them through the crowd of people. Eliza spent near half the night charming Slughorn's guests. Draco had abandoned her 20 minutes in claiming he had spotted a cousin or such in the crowd. He might have, for all she knew, but Eliza was sure he was simply bored of the pleasantries. Draco, bless him, had been born with connections to the wealthy and high class. Even with her title, Eliza would still have to earn them. "Well, M-girl," Slughorn said, as they left Johnson behind them, "I'm sure you're becoming tired of an old man's ramblings, but there is one more guest who has been dying to meet you. Old man, sir." "You do yourself an injustice," Eliza proclaimed dramatically, and Slughorn, clearly pleased with her comment, handed her another glass of champagne. Eliza may or may not be on her way to being quite tipsy. "I'd like you to meet Eldred Werple," Slughorn said, gesturing to a short, stout man in front of him, "an old student of mine, author of Blood Brothers, My Life Amongst the Vampires, and of course his friend Sanguini." Werple grabbed Eliza's hand and shook it enthusiastically. The vampire Sanguini, who was almost alarmingly tall with dark shadows under his eyes, merely nodded. He looked rather bored. A gaggle of girls was standing close to him, looking curious and excited. When his dark eyes met Eliza's, however, they seemed to light up with a hungry sort of interest. Eliza shuffled uncomfortably as Werple rattled on. "I don't quite think the girl is interested in a biography," Eldred, Sanguini drawled, and the conversation halted around them. "Aye, well," Werple stuttered out as Slughorn's eyes darted between them all. Smiling slightly, Eliza kept her eyes locked on Sanguini's. "Actually, gentlemen, you wouldn't mind leaving Sanguini and I to become better acquainted with one another, would you?" "Of course, M-girl," Slughorn said, and led a still stuttering Werple away, leaving Eliza and the vampire alone with one another on the outskirts of the room. "I know you," Sanguini crooned quietly, and Eliza resisted the urge to move away, or perhaps move closer. There was something about him that intrigued her, and yet repelled her in equal parts. There was something decidedly off about him that made her skin crawl, and yet her magic responded with interest. "He has spoken about you quite a lot. His lady heiress, his little star." Eliza's nose wrinkled in disgust as her nickname fell from Sanguini's lips, and her hand drifted up to her necklace, which, despite herself, Eliza had yet been able to remove. "Hello, mon petit mort," Sanguini purred, and Eliza felt like smacking her own head. He was a vampire, she was a necromancer, of bloody course. "And is there a reason for this riveting conversation, Sanguini?" Eliza asked, raising an eyebrow, and the vampire let out a low chuckle. "A lot has been promised to my kind. Perhaps I just wanted to meet the person behind it all," he offered with a cutting smirk. "And yet you are speaking to me," Eliza said, playing oblivious, taking a long sip of her drink. "Well, behind every great man, mon petit mort," he responded, leaning in even closer, and yet Eliza couldn't bring herself to move away. "Eliza!" Draco yelled over the crowd and stopped by her side, grabbing a hold of her hand, insistent on leading her away. "I can't believe you abandoned me. Daphne's looking for you." Eliza knew for a fact that Daphne was not looking for her, as Daphne was currently snogging Susan Bones in the corner, believing she was being discreet. but she let Draco lead her away anyway. "Until we meet again, Eliza Potter," Sanguini called, until Draco finally lost them in the crowd. "Can't believe you," he muttered to himself the second they were out of sight of the vampire. "Leave you alone for 2 hours. Start flirting with a bloody vampire." "We weren't flirting," Eliza protested, and Draco turned around to her, doing a poor imitation of Sanguini. "Of course you weren't mon petite mort," he said in a surprisingly good French accent. "Oh, so no man is ever allowed to take an interest in me now." Eliza bit back as they finally stumbled into Blaze, who had apparently been abandoned by Lavender 5 dances into the party. "No, Eliza, not when you're dating a Dark Lord," he said, jumping into the conversation, and Eliza flung her arms out dramatically. "So no one else can kiss me, because I know Tom, but Tom won't kiss me, and I can't find anyone else." Eliza fumed and snagged a glass of fire whiskey from a passing waiter, downing it in one. Eliza scanned the room looking for another waiter as Draco and Blaze exchanged dubious glances. "Eliza," Blaze asked, laughter clear in his voice, are you drunk?" "Not yet," Eliza said, and sneakily took another glass out of a wizard's hand, replacing it with her empty one. "Not nearly enough," Draco sighed, and tried to take the glass from her, but Eliza drank it all before he could. "Eliza, maybe you should slow down a bit." Eliza giggled slightly and poked Draco in his chest. "Or maybe you need to keep up," she said, and started walking away, intending on rejoining the party just to hear the last of Draco and Blaze's conversation as she walked away. Eliza Potter, drunk. Holy shit. Eliza continued to walk in among the party guests, chatting idly and stealing more and more drinks as the night progressed. At one point, she thought she bumped into Uncle Save. The man had tried to escort her back to her dorm, but Eliza had hit his shoes with a sticking charm and proceeded to dash away. It was when she was hiding from Uncle Save that she bumped into Granger, who was also hiding. Although she wasn't hiding from Uncle Save, no, instead she was hiding from McLagan. Eliza said dubiously, "Really? That man's a beast, Granger. I thought you had better taste." "Well, I couldn't very well take wrong, could I?" Granger said back, and Eliza spanned them around when she noticed McLagan glancing around looking for his missing date. "Merlin, you would have been better off with Blaze," Eliza chatted, and seemingly despite her better judgment, Granger continued to entertain her. "You'll forgive me for saying your friend Zabini has a rather notorious reputation himself." Eliza waved her hand carelessly, almost spilling some of her drink. "He just hasn't found a girl who can keep up with him yet. And you think I could?" Granger questioned dubiously as they once again darted between the curtains to hide from the ever-lurking McLagan. "Drop the whole righteous moral Gryffindor act first," Eliza drawled out, and was interrupted by Granger's indignant huff. Eliza pointed towards her, frowning. "See, that is exactly what I meant." "God, you're so drunk," Granger muttered to herself, but Eliza jabbed her finger in Granger's direction again. "So you can't say that." Eliza began to ramble. "Wizards don't have guards. It's rude," she ended sternly, and Granger reeled back in agitation. "Just because you think Muggleborns are scum." No, no, no," Eliza interrupted. "No one cares about that. Well, some people do, but they're dicks. Anyway, my point is, you're not a Muggleborn. You're just a witch. And witches don't believe in God, and they don't free house elves, because they know the culture magic is built on, and they embrace it because magic is everything we are and everything we will be." Eliza rambled before pausing and blinking heavily. It seemed Uncle Save had finally caught up to them. "Granger," Eliza Whisper shouted, "hide me from Uncle Save. The bat has found us, I repeat. The bat has found us." Granger let out a laugh and tentatively grabbed onto Eliza's arm. "Come on, Potter, let's find your friends and let them sober you up." "Screw being sober," Eliza pouted. "I'm never been sober again." Eliza let out a giant groan as she rested her head against the great hall table with a loud thump. The smell of breakfast was nauseating, and the lights were too bright, and her court were no help at all. "Come on now, Eliza," Thea said by her side, bright and chirpy. "Eat up. We've got a long train ride ahead of us." The thought of the Hogwarts Express only made her groan louder. "Why don't any of you have hangover potions?" Eliza whined, head pounding as she took a sip of her coffee. "Why is Severus doing this to me?" "Possibly because you called him Uncle Save in front of all of Slughorn's guests," Blaze pointed out with a smirk, and Eliza responded by eloquently flipping him off. Or the fact that you stuck his shoes to the floor, one or the other, Daphne tacked on, and Eliza shushed her. Why were they all so loud? Guys, you're all forgetting that Eliza tried to get it on with a vampire, Draco said, before taking another bite of his croissant. Eliza continued to moodily nibble on her strawberries and glared at him. Oh, and how about when we had to wrestle her notebook away from her at the end of the night to stop her sending drunk messages to the Dark Lord, Theo finished, and Eliza shot him a betrayed look. She expected better from him. So Daphne spends the night in the Hufflepuff dorms. No one says a thing. I get drunk and flirt with a vampire, and I never hear the end of it, Eliza finished. Her court exchanged glances before they all nodded. Yeah, pretty much. Eliza lobbed one of her strawberries at Draco's stupid head before they all rose from their seats. They did, after all, have a train to catch, and Eliza knew she would never, ever be drinking again.